Hi guys, in this video I'm going to go over the different ways of initializing an array. So let's start out by creating a constant of type int, and I call this length. This specifies the number of elements in my array, or in other words, the length of the array. Next, I create an integer array called numbers, and this will have 5 numbers, so I use the constant for this. The reason why I define it as a constant, because it's very easy to refer to the length anywhere else in my program. I don't have to retype and hard code 5 everywhere, and because that is very error prone. It's easy to forget or even type it in wrong, or even if we want to change it later, with a constant we can change it in a single place and the whole program will still work fine. So when I do this here, I create an array of 5 integers. Each of them are uninitialized, so we don't really know what the values are at this point. So an array is a fixed size. We can never change the size or the length of an array later. The only way we could, or what we could do if we need to store more elements, is create a new array and then copy the elements from the old array to the new array. But we cannot change the size once we create the array. Now, each element, so all the integers here, are stored at consecutive memory locations. And so we can use an offset called an index to access them. So the first index is at the first element is at index 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. In this case, 4 is the last element, or the index 4 specifies the last element. And the last element is always less than the length. So we never want to access an element at its length, because that would be out of the bounds of the array. So the upper bound is here, the lower bound is anything below 0. So if we access it at its length, in this case index 5, we would get an error, because we don't really know what's at this memory location. So in our program we always want to check if given an index that this is a valid index for the array. Now to initialize each element, first let me say that every element can be treated just like another variable. The only difference that we do is, instead of numbers, we do brackets and then the index. So if we have number 0, we basically deal with an integer variable that is stored here. So anything that you know of integer variables, you can just treat this one like an integer variable. Don't get confused with the brackets and the index. Now, same if you have a character array, if you just take the name of the array followed by the brackets and the index, it's just like another character variable. So it really applies to any type. Now to initialize this, let's store a 5 as a first element. Now our array would look like 5 followed by 4 uninitialized array elements. And I could do this really with any other index. Let's say I take index 3 and I store 2 there. Then my array would look like 5, which I stored in the previous instruction. And now I put 3 at this location, at the third index. Actually, I put 2 there, 2 at the third index. So if I want to initialize additional elements, I can really access any index and plug in a number there that I want to store there. What I can also do is I can prompt the user to enter a number. For example, enter a number, and let's say I want to store this number at the second index. Now I mentioned already you can treat it just like an integer variable. So we do the same. The only thing that we do here is add the brackets, index 1, and that's it. So the user enters a number, whatever will be entered will be stored at index 1, so at this position here. Last, we can also use a for loop. So we could say, for example, for int I0, I less than the length, I plus plus. So this creates a for loop, starts with index 0. If you look up here, then each iteration I incremented, so I will go from 0 to 1, 2, and so on, as long as I is less than length. So this really, the condition here specifies that I stay within the bounds of the array and that I don't go over the upper bound of the array. I could say enter an integer and then read it in to numbers at index I. So this will prompt 5 times and then store each time, for each prompt stored at the consecutive next memory location. Now, if I know the exact values I want to store in the array, I can also do the declaration of an array with the initialized values. So let's take a look at that. Let's say I have int values, and I call this values 1. Still, I just want to have 5. So I just reuse my constant. And now what I can do is I can use the braces, and inside I can store some numbers. Let's say 5, 8, 2, 1, and 7. Those are my 5 numbers. I should be sure, or I should make sure that I don't go beyond the length of the array. So if I say 5, I want to not provide more than 5 elements. So this will create an array of 5 integers. What I can also do is values 2, length 5, 8, 2, and stop right there. What this will give me is an array of 5, 8, and 2, and the remaining ones will not remain uninitialized. They will actually be initialized to 0. So this is convenient. If I just know a few of the elements, then the remaining ones will be initialized as well to the default value of 0. Now I can take advantage of this and can say, let's say I want to have an array of 5 elements and I want to initialize all of them to 0. I could do it with a loop, or I could add 5 statements, each with the individual index. Or what I can do is I can assign an empty list here. So what this will do is, like the previous one, take the value that I want to initialize with. In this case, I don't provide a value, but the remaining ones will be set to 0. So I will have 0, 0, 0, 0, and 0. 5 zeros. So my entire array is initialized just to zeros. So I hope this gives you some idea. I used integers here, but really you can use an array of characters, of booleans, of strings. And an array really is just a sequence of variables of the same type, and they are stored always at consecutive memory locations. That's why we can provide an index to access them. And also remember, we cannot change the size after we create an array. So we have to kind of predict how many elements we need. I hope this gives you some ideas of how to create arrays. Thank you for watching.